I never thought my name would be printed on anything fancy, the kind of paper people frame instead of fold. But there it was, written in clean black letters on thick cream paper, like it belonged there. Michael Carter, invited to the Bennett Foundation annual charity gala. I stood in my small kitchen holding the invitation with hands that still smelled like motor oil. I read it again and again, half expecting the letters to change, to admit it was a mistake, but my name stayed right there, bold and clear, like someone truly meant for me to see it. I am a single dad. I fix cars in a garage in Portland. My days are loud with engines and clanging tools. My nights are quiet, spent at a wobbly kitchen table helping my daughter Emma with her homework. I teach her math using bolts and washers because that is what I have. My world is small and honest. It does not include chandeliers, tuxedos, or champagne. This invitation came because of Emma. She is 11, bright, brave. She earned a Bennett scholarship at her private school. She worked for it. Every late night, every test. This gala was meant to honor families like ours. At first, I wanted to hide the letter in a drawer with old bills and papers I never answer. I could already feel the looks, the quiet laughs. I did not own a tuxedo. I did not know how to talk about money or trips to Europe. Walking into that room felt like asking to be humiliated. Emma saw it on my face before I said a word. She pushed the invitation back toward me and whispered, "Dad, you deserve to be there. They should see who I'm working so hard for." Her words hit deeper than pride. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone at the table staring at the invitation. I thought about the years of fixing torn clothes, the early mornings driving her across town before my shop opened. I thought about how her eyes light up when she talks about the stars and becoming an astrophysicist. I realized something then. If I let my fear stop me, I would be teaching her the wrong lesson. So I decided to go. Not to impress anyone, not to pretend I was rich. I would go for her. Even if my suit did not fit, even if I stood out, I would stand there as her father. The night of the gala, I wore a navy suit borrowed from a friend. It sagged in places and pulled in others, but it was clean. I polished my old shoes until my arms hurt, even though the leather still showed its age. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see a man who belonged in ballrooms. I saw Emma's dad. That had to be enough. I drove my old pickup truck toward the Riverlight Hotel and parked 2 blocks away. I didn't want anyone noticing the rust first. I sat there for a moment gripping the steering wheel, breathing slow. Then I pictured Emma at home, telling herself her dad was brave. That thought got me out of the truck. The hotel looked like something out of another life. Marble steps, golden lights, fancy cars lined up with valets rushing around. Women in shining dresses, men in perfect suits. I felt small standing there, but I reminded myself why I came. Inside, the air smelled like perfume and polish. Crystal lights hung above like stars I could never reach. I stepped forward anyway. I felt it immediately, the shift. Eyes sliding over me, pausing too long. A few quiet laughs near the bar. I smiled politely. I nodded. No one nodded back. At my table, no one welcomed me. I introduced myself anyway. Michael Carter. My daughter Emma is a Bennett Scholarship student. A woman smiled without warmth. Another man went back to his phone. I sat down and placed my hands on the table, steady. I felt alone, but I did not let it show. I had stood in harder rooms than this, school offices, doctor waiting rooms, nights with more bills than money. They could laugh if they wanted. I sat tall, because my daughter earned her place here, and I would not shrink for anyone. I stayed in that chair even when the silence pressed in. The room moved around me like I was standing still in a river. Voices rose and fell, glasses clinked. People leaned close to each other and laughed in ways that sounded practiced. I did not try to join. I listened. I watched. I reminded myself why I was there.
A waiter offered wine. I shook my head and asked for water. He looked surprised, but nodded. When the glass touched the table, my hands wrapped around it like it was an anchor. Cold. Real. Something I understood. A man across from me finally spoke. He glanced at my suit, then at my hands. "So what line of work are you in?" he asked, polite but distant. "I fix cars. Neighborhood garage. Been there a long time." His smile tightened. "Ah." That was all. His attention drifted away like I had finished serving my purpose. I did not feel ashamed. My hands told my story better than words ever could. Every scar meant a meal on the table. Every rough edge meant Emma had shoes that fit. Still, being invisible in a crowded room does something to you. It makes you question the space you take up. I thought about my father then. He worked in a lumber mill until his back gave out. He used to tell me dignity is not something people hand you, it is something you carry when no one is looking. I carried it now. That was when I felt it, a pause in the room, like the air had shifted its weight. I looked up. She had entered without noise, but somehow everyone noticed. Isabella Bennett. I recognized her instantly, even though I had only seen her in photos. She did not move like the others. She did not rush or perform. She walked like she belonged everywhere and needed nothing from anyone. Her dress was a deep green that caught the light without trying. Her hair was pulled back simply. She spoke to people as she passed, offering smiles that felt calm, not forced. The room bent toward her without her asking. I expected her to pass me by like the rest. She did not. Her eyes met mine. Not a quick glance, not a polite scan. She held my gaze for a breath longer than necessary, just long enough to make it real. She nodded once, small, respectful. I nodded back before I could stop myself. That was it. No words, no smile meant for show, but something shifted inside me. I had been seen, truly seen, not as a problem, not as a project, as a person. I noticed the table react before I understood why. A woman frowned slightly. A man straightened in his chair. They had seen it too. The moment Isabella Bennett chose to acknowledge someone they had already decided did not matter. I lowered my eyes back to my glass. I did not need more attention, but the weight in my chest felt lighter. A few minutes later, I stood and excused myself. I needed air. The ballroom felt tighter now, louder. I slipped through tall doors and stepped onto the balcony. The night was cool. The city stretched out below, lights glowing soft and steady. I leaned on the railing and breathed like I had been holding it in all evening. That was when I heard her voice. "It gets loud in there." I turned slowly. Isabella stood a few steps away, her hands resting lightly on the railing. Without the crowd, without the lights, she looked different, quieter, more real. "Yeah," I said, "it does." She smiled slightly, not at me, but at the city. I needed a moment. So did I. Silence settled between us, but it was not heavy. It felt earned. "You're Emma's father," she said. "Yes." My voice softened without meaning to. "She's everything to me." "I met her," Isabella said. "She spoke about stars like they were friends." I chuckled. "I used to point them out from the roof of my truck, told her every one had a story." "And you taught her to believe she could reach them," Isabella said. I looked at her then, really looked. Not the billionaire, not the name, just a woman who understood something most people in that room did not. We talked about Emma, about long nights, about building something with nothing but effort and hope. She listened without interrupting, without checking the room behind me. For the first time that night, I did not feel out of place. When we went back inside, I felt the change immediately. People watched us, whispered, measured. I did not care. I sat down again, shoulders steady. Whatever this night became, I had already gained something worth more than approval. I had been seen, and I had a feeling the evening was not done with me yet.
When we returned to the ballroom, the looks were sharper. No one tried to hide them now. Heads leaned together, voices dropped. I could feel stories being written about me without my permission. I sat anyway. A woman at my table leaned closer, her smile sweet, but her eyes curious in the wrong way. "So," she said softly, "how do you know Isabella Bennet?" I met her gaze without flinching. We talked about our kids. That was all. She blinked, clearly disappointed. She wanted drama. She wanted something she could repeat. When none came, she leaned back, confused. Across the room, the auction was starting. Velvet books were opened, paddles lifted like it was a game. Numbers climbed fast. People laughed as if money was light as air. I watched quietly. I had no paddle, no need for one. Then the auctioneer announced the final item, a private dinner with Isabella Bennet. The room buzzed, hands shot up. The numbers rose higher than anything I had ever earned in a year. Then Isabella stood. The room fell silent. "I would like to change the final bid," she said calmly. "I will donate $100,000 to the foundation in the name of Michael Carter. And if he agrees, I would like to share that dinner with him." My name echoed through the room like a dropped glass. Every eye turned toward me. Shock, confusion, disbelief. I stood slowly. My heart was steady. My voice was calm. "If that's what you want," I said, "then I'd be honored." The silence broke into whispers. I sat back down, hands relaxed. I did not feel proud. I did not feel small. I felt grounded. When the night ended, Isabella walked beside me through the lobby. Away from the noise, she looked at me differently. "I hope I didn't make things uncomfortable," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "You reminded me I belong wherever my daughter's future takes her." She smiled, soft and real. Outside, the night air felt clean, lighter. The next morning, Emma hugged me tight before school. "You look different," she said. "Maybe I feel different," I told her. Days later, a letter arrived. Isabella invited me to help guide the foundation, not as a symbol, as a voice. That evening, I met her at a small cafe. No lights, no marble, just two people talking. She looked at me and asked, "Do you think we should keep talking?" I nodded. "I'd like that." Something new began, quiet, real. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt open.
Life did not change overnight. I still woke up early. I still made coffee in the same chipped mug. I still drove to the same garage where engines waited and bills followed. But something inside me had shifted. I carried myself differently. Not because of what happened at the gala, but because I finally understood something I had spent years forgetting. I had never been less than anyone else in that room. I had only been unseen. Emma felt it too. She watched me more closely in the mornings, like she was trying to figure out what had changed. One night, while I helped her with homework, she looked up and said, "Dad, you didn't let them make you feel small, did you?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, sweetheart, I didn't." She nodded like that answer mattered, because it did. Over the next few weeks, I met with Isabella more often. Sometimes it was about the foundation, about making sure kids like Emma were supported without their families being treated like charity cases. Other times, it was just coffee, simple places, quiet conversations. She never tried to impress me, never talked about money unless it mattered. She asked about my days at the shop, about Emma. She listened the way people rarely do when they are used to being the most important voice in the room. One evening, as we walked along the river, she stopped and looked at me. "You know," she said, "that night at the gala, everyone thought I was making a statement." I raised an eyebrow. "Weren't you?" She smiled softly. "Not the one they think. I wasn't trying to shock anyone. I just didn't want my foundation to forget why it exists." "And why is that?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Because dignity should never be rare." Those words stayed with me.
The board meetings were not easy at first. Some people still looked at me like I was out of place, like I had wandered into a room meant for others. But I spoke anyway, about families, about fear, about what it feels like to work hard and still feel invisible. Slowly, things changed. Emma thrived. She talked about stars like they were waiting for her. She believed in her future without hesitation, and I believed in mine without apology. One night, sitting at the same old kitchen table, Isabella joined us for dinner. Nothing fancy, just food, laughter, and stories. Emma talked non-stop. Isabella listened like every word mattered. After Emma went to bed, Isabella looked around the small apartment and smiled. "This," she said, "this feels real." "It is," I replied. She reached for my hand, not dramatic, not rushed, just honest. "I'm glad you didn't walk away that night." "So am I," I answered. Because sometimes life does not change with noise or applause. Sometimes it changes quietly. When someone sees you, when you refuse to shrink, when love and respect meet in the simplest of places. I walked into that ballroom thinking I did not belong. I walked out knowing I always had.